Hi everybody, here we have the club game for February, which will be a Dark Ages battle, the Battle of Fulford Gate from 1066. We'll be using a set of unpublished rules called Werod, which have been developed by the Exiles Wargames Club. We'll also be using the Wargamer Ada Comp game system with some custom insert cards that have been developed specifically for this rule set. A little bit of background for you on this battle. Battle at Fulford Gate in 1066 was fought just a couple of weeks before the Battle of Hastings. We had Harold Hardrada and Tostig Godwinson leading the Viking forces had invaded the north of England, and the Saxon forces were led by the Earls Morcar and Edwin, and it was after this battle that the Saxon forces here then had to march south to help King Harold fight William the Conqueror at the Battle of Hastings. Here we can see some of the warband units formed up for a Dark Ages battle. The battlefield is fairly straightforward. It's going to be two lines of troops advancing on each other. The Saxons are occupying a ridge by the River Ouse, and it's up to the Vikings to attack and push the Saxons off of this ridge and open up the road to York to gain victory in the game. Nice feature with these rules is it's not so much the dependent on figures being taken off as casualties. As we can see here, the performance of the troops is dependent on leadership and motivation. So the leader can expend points to motivate his troops throughout the course of the game. So the leader's leadership rating will only ever slowly decrease, but the unit's motivation factor can increase and decrease at different points during the course of the game, depending on combat and other factors. There can be taunts and all kinds of things that will be going on. And here we can see the two lines of troops advancing on each other. The Vikings forming up into wedges in an attempt to pierce the Saxon line and break the units there as quickly as they possibly can. They do have to get across the river, which slows them down a little bit. We have a challenge goes out fairly early on in the game, where the Viking leader comes out, but unfortunately he had his leadership rating dented slightly as he lost the combat and has to go back and into his warband in disgrace. This doesn't stop the Viking attack. They still come on in wedge formation, and the Saxons have formed up into a supported shield wall, which is the most powerful defense formation that they can have. This will actually make it a little bit more difficult for the Vikings to break through. Not all of the Viking forces are on the table at the beginning. Harold Hardrada himself is not on the table, so we don't know straight away where he is going to be coming on, but then he does appear on the left flank of the Viking forces and joins the troops there in an effort to push through the Saxon right flank and push up the road to York. We have a fair amount of skirmishing going on in between the archer units of all of the troops on both sides. We have a reasonable amount of goading and taunting going on to try and demoralise the troops. And again, a feature of these rules that once troops get within hand-to-hand combat distance, the archers don't really play any further part in the game. They just simply retire and leave it to the main body of the troops to get on and do the main fighting. And that's what's happening now. The Viking line has now pretty much got its way through the river, as we can see here, and is now pushing up in their wedge formations to start attacking the Saxon line. Vikings are quite successful in the centre initially. They start pushing back a couple of the Saxon units and breaking one or two of them, which causes a bit of a hole to appear in the Saxon line, which is not particularly good news for them. But on the Saxon left flank of the battlefield, they have a little bit more success, and they manage to hold the Vikings off initially, and they do slowly start to push the Vikings back. And again here they break a couple of the Viking formations, so we have the battle is reasonably even at this stage of the game. We have Hardrada now goes into the attack on the Viking left flank in an attempt to break through the Saxon forces there and push on the road to York. And if he does this, he can claim victory, because he'll have effectively outflanked the Saxon forces. But he's having a pretty tough time of it here. The Saxon forces not giving way and not being pushed back off their hill. And here we can see the Saxon troops on the left flank now beginning to encircle the Viking forces, which is a little bit worrying for them, as if they are destroyed, the Saxons will be able to claim victory in the battle. But unfortunately the Saxons on the left flank, they don't press their advantage, and a couple of their units do become demoralised and their leadership rating drops quite dramatically, which saves the Viking right flank. The centre of the battlefield has been claimed by the Vikings now, with a couple of the Saxon units now completely routed. But the fight on the Saxon right flank is pretty even, and Hardrada can't break through, and the Saxon forces here have got them pretty well held up, and it's going to be a long time before I think anybody gains the advantage here. So with the situation on the battlefield fairly static, but with the Viking right flank virtually beaten and the Saxon centre broken, and the Saxon right flank with the Vikings there locked in combat, the umpire calls a halt to the battle and declares it an honourable draw.